what would be the future of the marketing, in the disruptive times? And I can see the disruptive times are happening, We are all here to learn, but everybody is carrying the cell phone, So disruption is there. Everybody is having the phones in their hands, taking pictures, looking on the social media, etc., etc. So let's ask the experts, we have Professor Philip Kotler, Mark Oliver, and Dominic, that what would happen, in such a disruptive times, where the life has really gone disruptive in the last few years. As Luis Moutinho just said, that data, everybody is focusing on data, and 90% of data is collected in the last 2 years. So what was the life before the data was collected, I think everything was pretty normal. Marketing was happening, brands were coming out, so much was on the planet, I mean, this is a very different world. Before we start with the panelists, I give you an example here. Myself and Professor Kotler, we went to a country, We landed in the morning and we met quite a bit of people, Somebody picked us from the airport and took us around back to the hotel. And in the evening, there was a dinner, gala dinner, and there were about 300 top people. And everybody was, when they were getting a minute for talking, they say marketing is dead, marketing is dead, marketing is dead. When my turn came, I also said the marketing is dead. They said, how you know that marketing is dead here? You came this morning. I said, I came this morning, I met so many people, I gave my card to everybody, my business card, and at the end of the day, among all you 300, I got one business card in return. And they were all looking on each other, who made this mistake, who gave this business card? And I said, don't worry, it's not among you. And the funny thing was, the driver who picked us in the morning, he gave the business card, because a business card is a marketing tool for you, for yourself. And that guy wanted to do his marketing. So the people who were at the dinner, they said, yeah, marketing is dead. And I understood very well. And so in a very different world we are living today, where we are in disruptive world, and we are thinking how the marketing will shape up with all the neuroscience tools and all the big data. So let me start my question with Professor Kotler. Professor Kotler, you as a father of modern marketing, how you foresee the future of marketing in the next 10 years, sir?
I think, can you hear me, first of all?
Yes.
Raise your hands if you cannot hear me. No hands showed up, so you can hear me. Thank you. I think that marketing will be more and more understood by people over time in many countries. The main thing to share with you is that marketing is not only about commerce. We try to market places in the world, like Istanbul. People here are trying to get factories to come to Turkey, more tourists to come, more skilled people to come to Turkey. So that's a marketing problem. We call that place marketing. That's becoming an art. I have been asked how to market a nation. In fact, one of our tasks will be how to market Turkey. But then there's also the marketing of ideas, the marketing of social causes, the marketing of people, celebrities. For example, a lot of young people come to me and they say, I'm a singer, I'd like to become well-known. What she is saying is, I want to be a brand. So the whole idea is that from marketing being something that a company making food or clothing does, to being something that everyone should do easily and with understanding. Let me give you an example. I remember someone coming to me and saying, I don't have anything to do with marketing. So I say to them, did you ever apply for a job? And they say, yes. And I said, what did you do to be sure you're the one to win the job? Oh, I dressed very well, I combed my hair and so on. You did marketing. You were trying to project your brand or create a brand. Then I would say, did you ever compete for an apartment in an area where there's just a few apartments, but you want to live in that area? Oh, yes. And what did you say to the agent? I showed the agent I'm very reliable, that I fit into this community. So just in the practice of living, a person has to be pretty sensitive to other people and to project why they are going to be helpful to fit in, and so on. So part of the future is marketing will become common in the vocabulary of people, whether they're marketing causes, ideas, places, and so on and so forth. And there are skills involved. And the skills generally in marketing are the 4 Ps. Knowing what to make of your product. How are you going to price your time and your effort? How are you going to message people about what you are about? You know, product, price, place, and promotion still remain part of any marketing plan, even if it's not about a product. And the other idea that will get to be bigger is get more precise about what your purpose is and who you are trying to help, whose life you're trying to improve. Because, you know, Coca-Cola doesn't have that problem. Coca-Cola is a mass product that is supposed to make everyone happy if they enjoy that kind of sugar drink. But normally, any good marketer says, I can't serve the world. I'm going to define my target market. And we have a name for the process. It's STP. Segment the market. Break it into parts. Figure out which segment is the one you should be addressing. And it should be a segment where you can do a good job for that segment. Don't choose a segment where you're not capable. And then position yourself and tell that segment why you can do the best for them. And it's as simple as that. And that's called segmentation, targeting, and positioning. So this will become common language in much of social discourse over the years.
Sure. Professor Mark, are you ready?
I think so.
Okay. So my question to you is, Mark, you know, we are living in a very different world. We are living in a world of digitalization. We are almost, I call it, we are almost slave to the technology, you know. So it's a very different world where we are totally depending on kind of technologies and etc. Now, when a company plans their marketing budget, what you feel should be given to the traditional marketing and what portion should go to the digital marketing? Although I believe that digital and marketing are two separate scenarios. Marketing is a word which is hijacked by the digital guys just to create a situation, digital marketing. So what you feel, what should be the ideal balancing of the budget?
It's a very good question. Thanks, Fahim. This question is very difficult to answer, and I would like to answer like my wife always answers. I'm married to a judge, so she's a lawyer, and every time I'm asking her, was he guilty, was he not guilty, she always said, it depends. So I'm answering the question like she would do. So it depends on the target customer. So, for example, if you're targeting Professor Kotler, Philip was just talking about the STP, segmentation, targeting, and positioning. If you're targeting, for example, elderly people being 60 and over, they are probably less using social media that extensively than Generation Y or Generation Z are doing. So it depends very much on your target group. So there is no rule of thumb saying you have to have 50-50 or 70-30. So first you need to observe how the customers behave. And Professor Moutinho and also Professor Morin Cerf were highlighting how you can better understand your customers. So first you need to understand who is the customer, what is their buying behavior, what is their media usage in order to answer that question in a sophisticated way.
Let me ask a question. Can a company be safe in not going into digital at all, just using 30-second commercials and a good, the right price and so on? Can a small or medium-sized company be safe in not starting some digitalization? And on the other hand, at the other extreme, can some young person start a company saying, I'm only going to go digital, and I'm going to be successful, and I'm never going to make a 30-second commercial or talk to an ad agency? Both extremes are possible.
Yeah, both extremes are possible, and I think this is absolutely doable, in particular because there are so many small and medium-sized enterprises who are not having multi-million-dollar budget like Coca-Cola has. Social media in general is a very, very good way and platform to talk to a potentially very, very relevant big audience. So that is
Mark,
very good.
Let me ask you this. I'm a company here, let's say, that does not have one digital person in the company. There's no young person who was a digital native. Do I need one? And how do I go about, what do I do with the first one? How much is it going to cost me, or she going to cost me? And what should I say they should be doing for the next month or the next year? How much, I have to give them a budget, don't I?
Right, yeah, absolutely agree. So everybody talks about digital marketing or digitalization or transformation. You need, of course, also to staff the departments accordingly. So just having a Facebook page or Twitter account is not good enough, because people want to talk to companies in today's world. It's more a kind of a dialogue, and all customers are expecting that.
Wait,
so,
I may disagree.
And you need people to talk to,
what about,
to customers.
Isn't the first thing is for that digital person you just hired to get your web going? You should have a web address. You should.
Sure.
You should have which tells what kind of company you are and how to reach the company and all that.
Sure,
now that takes some time, and that may take about a month building a good web.
Of course. Yeah, you need a web page, but also you need Twitter and Facebook account as well, depending on the target group, right? And depending on your goals you want to achieve. So, but it is not doable with current stuff, because it takes a lot of resources. For example, we work with Adidas. Adidas, they just have 50 people only in social media reading the whole day what is written in any kind of forum about Adidas and about their competitors as well. So they spend enormous amounts of money also, invest in people to observe how customers tick and to engage in dialogues. But of course, first you need to get the basics right. You need a website which is attractive, where people can contact you, etc., etc.
Professor Dominic, I faced a situation. I was in Bulgaria speaking on a conference, and the Facebook head of Europe was sitting next to me in the panel, and I asked him, I said, oh, so companies are spending through the Facebook on advertising. Have you ever calculated the ROIs? And he said, no, that's not our job. So my question to you, that how imperative it is when you spend on the digital media for communicating your product, how important the ROI is, return on investment?
Okay. All right, that is also a big question, and it's not just with respect to digital media, but media in general. It's just a little easier to do with digital media. So, how important is it? I would say it's a function of the role of the media in your enterprise. See, we know that advertising elasticities or effects, let's say, by themselves, they're not that high. I'm not saying they're zero, but they're not that high. No company has ever gone out of business because it put too much money in TV and not enough in radio, in other words, okay? But when the media, like the Facebook medium or other, starts to fulfill different roles, then it becomes very, very important. For example, if it is a vehicle for distribution building, so in other words, it's not just the advertising, it's also reaching customers that you otherwise cannot reach and actually have business with them. Now it's not just advertising, but it's also distribution. In some cases, it adds pricing into it. In other words, the medium is not only a vehicle for advertising and for distribution, it's actually a vehicle for segmented pricing. Okay? So now the role of that medium gets bigger and bigger, and I like very much what Professor Cutler said earlier about use the 4 Ps as a framework. It's very, very powerful. Promotion, place, product, and price. So that's my general answer to that. Now, if you now get into the area of ROI measurement, as many companies do, then sure, if you have so much money to spend, you want to spend it where it produces the highest return. That's quite clear. But that's going to impact the profitability of the enterprise, not necessarily the survivability of the enterprise, okay? So in other words, it's terribly important from an efficiency perspective, but I view it as somewhat less important from a strategic perspective. And I hope that clarifies the difference.
Well, let me ask a question. In the old world of marketing, the old marketing is called, the time we used advertising and the 30-second commercial and so on. Did we know what the ROI was for a campaign where we spent hundreds, so much money?
Yeah.
Did we ask the advertising agency to come back with a number? And were they fake numbers or real?
Okay. That's a tricky question to answer as follows. We certainly had the ability to know. Okay?
We did.
Since about the 1960s, we've seen research on measuring advertising ROI. One of your books, going back to 1970 or something, a long time ago, actually showed exactly how to do it. I'm referring to the Blue Book. And so we've known how to do this for quite some time. Whether we actually did it, that's a different question. And the ad agencies may not always been in their best interest to promote that kind of information. But in the last few years, I would say that interest has gone up a lot because there is a big call worldwide for what's known as marketing accountability. So demonstrating that the investment actually produces something rather than just maybe a good feeling about it. Okay?
And you've told some of us meaningfully that one way to find out the ROI is to do experiments, because if you are going to reach 3 different neighborhoods in Istanbul with the same campaign, and they're similar neighborhoods, and you just put a lot more digital in one and less in another or whatever, that experiment will show the impact.
Yes, that is one way to do it, and often what smaller companies can do who don't necessarily have huge databases to document their advertising impact. But yes, just as you said, you can do relatively simple things. If you're questioning whether or not a certain campaign is effective, take part of your market and don't do the campaign at all.
Right.
Go, as known as, go dark in that market. Or take another one and double the spending, okay? And learn from the reactions to say, oh, this works and this doesn't work, okay? The digital age actually makes that a lot easier. Because, yes, because the manipulation with randomization techniques of randomly exposing some consumers and randomly not exposing other consumers makes that, in fact, very easy. And a lot of companies in the digital space actually will never do any campaign without having run an experiment to prove that it actually works.
Well, I'm getting an idea that we need a new person in our company in the marketing department who I will call a finance researcher. I'm not sure who could help track what we're doing and knows finance as well as marketing and can give us reliable numbers. We don't have such a, what would we call that person?
Yeah.
Financial marketer?
Perhaps. In fact, you just used an important word. That person that you're describing is not necessarily in the marketing department. That person may well be in the chief financial officer's office or department, or if you wish.
Let me go further. In big companies, it's very important for the head of marketing to be friends with the head of finance.
Yes.
Finance owns the money. And if they don't think you're using it well, they tell the CEO that we're wasting our money on marketing. And so the best thing you can do is have your office next to the finance guy and say, let's together work out a rating system, a scoring system that pleases you as the finance person, pleases me as the marketing person, that we can tell the CEO what happened with the money.
That's exactly right, yes. And again, some companies have taken the lead in this and have good partnerships between those two groups, and others, quite frankly, don't and have kind of adversarial roles because the financial metrics are quite clear. They're ROI type metrics. The marketing metrics are less clear. Mm-hmm. They might be brand strength, however measured. Right. Okay? Or consumer preferences or consumer awareness. Those are metrics that marketing people like. And the finance people say, okay, but show me how that impacts the bottom line. Okay? Mm-hmm. So that communication needs to happen. And unfortunately, the digital age makes that much easier.
You know, when you say ROI should be measured if possible, I agree. But there are other things like, how do we know that our brand is getting stronger or weaker? Brand strength is a word you just used. Mm-hmm. What's the metrics there? Is it the word brand equity? How do I track the strength of my brand and so on?
Yeah. There are a couple of ways to do it, and it's a good point. I mean, here's a very simple one for a small company. How much business do you generate from customers calling you versus business generating from you calling customers? Okay.
Good.
As you like to point out, the difference between the push and the pull. Okay. If people call you with business and you don't have to do anything, you got a strong brand. But if you have to call people all the time and sell hard, okay, your brand needs work. Okay. And sometimes just that ratio, if I did 100,000 lira worth of business, how much came from incoming without any effort versus with effort, that's a good, very practical measure of brand strength.
You remind me of something that is technical, but it's called the Net Promotion Score.
NPS,
which you could look up right in the internet. Yeah. Net Promotion Score. It's a sign of how strong your brand is. Do this. Ask a sample of your customers the following question. Have you ever recommended our brand? You use it, but have you ever talked about it to anyone else? And if the person says, I love the brand, and I've told a lot of people, give that a score of 10. This is a scale, 1 to 10. If they say, you know, I've occasionally mentioned your brand favorably, but I don't do much of it, but I'm willing to do more, give it a 9. If they say, I've never done it, but sure, I would be comfortable praising your brand, that's an 8. By the way, some of your customers will say, I don't talk about it. In fact, I don't like your brand, frankly. And so that's, the Net Promotion Score is if you interviewed 100 people, how many 10s, 9s, and 8s did you get? And subtract from that how many 1s, 2s, and 3s you got. And that's your Net Promotion Score. It's another measure, right, of the strength of your brand.
Yes, it is. I'll address that a little bit later this afternoon in my presentation. But these measures of customer satisfaction and customer loyalty, NPS is one of them, is a very good one. Not only are a very good indicator that any company can gather of how you're doing relative to your customers, but it's actually, now for publicly traded firms, it's actually been shown to influence your stock price. Okay?
More on that.
Yeah,
give us an idea.
It's very interesting. Stepping outside of marketing here into finance for a little bit. You know, financial theory and investment theory will say that only when your cash flows go up in sort of an unexpected way, in other words, good news, do you see a movement in stock price. Okay? In other words, investors react to real numbers, and when they're positively surprised, they buy, and when they're negatively surprised, they sell. Very simple. Well, some very extensive data analysis has shown that these movements in customer satisfaction, even though in the very short run, they don't really do anything to your cash flow, right? The cash flow is what it is, but they are a leading indicator, okay? So if your customer satisfaction goes up, then one of three things or all things happen. Number one, your existing customers come back to you. Two, they buy more from you. And three, they tell other people, okay? And that generates future cash flows that the investors are not yet aware of, okay? So it's a leading indicator, in other words. And there is no reason to believe why that wouldn't be the same with smaller firms that are not publicly traded, because they too have a value. It may not be a public value, but it's a private value to the owners.
A lot of companies here will want to become a strong brand, feature a strong brand, and how do they know that their brand work is on a new brand? On a new brand, they're going to create awareness. That's what we're good at. I mean, we can, by the way, it's not that easy nowadays. It's hard to get anyone's attention. Everyone is busy. So even getting awareness, but that's the easy part.
Yeah.
But that's not enough. You may want to kill your new brand because it's only getting awareness, but no one's buying.
Right.
So what are the stages?
Yeah. Well, as you said, it starts with awareness.
Okay.
But if the awareness creates a sense of preference, which is the next stage, or at least intent to buy, okay, you're closer to purchasing. If there is purchasing, now comes the most important one, is there needs to be satisfaction, okay? And then you get repeat purchasing, okay? Some of my students ask me, for example, what is going to happen to Tesla in the world market? You know, so here is this electric car company or battery company that is quite a bit ahead of the competition in terms of the number of models and the volume of their cars, but they have tremendous financial problems. They are tremendous setup costs, etc. And so the stock price is like a yo-yo. It goes like this, okay? And so some people ask me, well, how do you know that Tesla will succeed? My answer is always, look at people who are buying their second Tesla. Okay.
It's a good one.
And the company's been out now 5, 6, 7 years, maybe more. It's probably time to see a repeat purchase kick in. Yeah. If you see a lot of these original Tesla owners buy the second Tesla or the third Tesla, this company is going to be just fine.
Good.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
Good, good. You know, it's interesting. I read an article about branding will be less important in the automobile business generally when we end up with driverless cars. Think about it. A lot of people buy a car to be part of their power and to make a statement about themselves. I'm driving a Mercedes, I'm enjoying it. When we don't drive our own car, we just walk into and sit down in our car, the brand will be less important. Is that possible?
Possible, yes, but if the brand adjusts to this different reality, then it seems to me there are marketing ways to avoid that.
Okay.
First of all, the existing car makers have the joy of driving, for lack of a better word. They exploit that differently. For example, BMW is very big on that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the driverless car in that sense is a bit of a threat to BMW.
Yes.
Because they are very big on that joy of driving, which now
just
goes away.
driving, yeah.
Exactly. But there are other aspects of a driverless car that I may not have thought about
Safety,
yet.
other things,
Exactly.
yes.
Comfort and a whole host of other attributes.
Yeah.
So the generalization of that is that strong brands, even strong brands, need to adjust to changing times and changing consumer tastes. I think that's an example of that general principle.
Sure.
The brands, what's happening, I give the example of Mercedes. They have slightly revised their strategy. What they think, it was an image once upon a time. Now they say, oh, we need one Merc in every doorstep. And that's where they have come up with the good old days when they have the star on the front. And people all feel this is Mercedes. Now there is a A series, B series, C series, E series. So they have come from a tiny one to a longer one. Maybach, they have concluded the line, you know. So they knew that what is happening in future. The star is no more there on the front. They have rather fixed it on the bonnet, you know. So BMW is quite smart, but Merc has they want to be everywhere.
Yeah.
Because in this time, you know, you were talking about in the finance and marketing clashes, you know.
Sure.
But you always suggest, you know, always advise that you should have two majors, finance and marketing. So you're expert in both at the same time, that spending and the ROIs also.
Yes.
So that's a great way to
I've
learn.
always advised my students to do a double major.
Sure.
Because especially if they want to rise in the company.
Yes.
Rising in the company, it gets to be more and more about finance because the big picture.
Sure.
And if they don't know that, then they're going to stay a marketing researcher.
Yes.
Or a product manager, but they're not going to be chosen to run the company. And by the way, it's very interesting information about how we choose CEOs. I mean, we have a lot of people here who run companies. They are the CEO. Did you know in my country, 25% of the chosen CEOs are asked to leave after 2 years? What a bad job of choosing CEOs. If that data is correct, why are we choosing the wrong CEOs? The answer is we choose them on the wrong basis. Let's use him because he's likable. What has likability got to do with running a company? It might help, but that may mean he always wants to be likable so he doesn't make tough decisions. But every good CEO knows he's going to lose. He won't be liked by some people because he's decisive. He makes decisions, and it doesn't make everyone happy. So we're now trying to, there's been a big study conducted on how we choose, what the traits are of a person who's capable of running a company. We can talk about that later. May I ask something, Mark, of you? You and I wrote a book on social media marketing. So should people who never were digital, can they be really good digital people by just retraining? I mean, we should probably hire some young people too,
Right.
who grew up with it. But in your experience, have people who have a lot of experience but they never did digital, can we train them to be very good at digital?
Yeah, that is absolutely possible, but you have to be open-minded for that. You don't have to stick to the old things. Because I think that is a general trait that also should be encompassed by every kind of chief executive officer in today's world. So being open-minded, being innovative, because a lot of times we are coming to small and medium-sized enterprises, also the big ones, and we're telling them, why are you doing this, this kind of strategy in this kind of way? They are saying, oh, we've been doing this for 100 years, for example. That's always a nice saying. All right, we have been doing this for 100 years, or we know our customers for 125 years. And then I always ask the question, how old are they now? Didn't they ever change? So, and they said, oh, it's still the same kind of target group, right? But consumer buying behavior and media usage, they change. So if they adapt, they can learn that. And you were asking the question to Dominic, to Professor Hansens, in how far is there a sales funnel? So it starts with awareness. And we have a new kind of model in social media. We believe it's quite practical. We call it not the AIDA model. This was the old model coming from the old days. Attention, interest, desire, and action. And now we have, it's easy to remember, we have this ASIDAS model. It sounds a bit like Adidas. Attention, and then people, all too often they are doing search. So they are going on the internet and then they're searching for something, for a service or for a company, a corporation. So attention, search, and then interest, desire, action, and then it's sharing, as it does. So the S in the end is for sharing, because it's what you were referring to if they buy the second Tesla. And also I would like to add, if they continue to talk about Tesla, then become brand ambassadors. And this could be also an interesting metric, an interesting KPI, key performance indicator, to track the success of a campaign.
Very good.
So I would say it is applicable. It's very easy for every kind of enterprise to capitalize on social media.
Mark, I have a question. You know, lately the companies have started cutting the digital marketing budget. The first one, Procter & Gamble, they cut by $200 million in September. Now, as you are expert on social media, you wrote the book together with Google and on YouTube, etc., and with Professor Kotler also. So what do you think, why they have started cutting the budget? A reason could be that when an ad goes out, it's not seen by the organic eyes, it is by the robots, or somebody is watching and the numbers are clicking and the companies are making money like Google and Facebook. What is your opinion on that?
We think that this is due to the target group they're aiming at, because the younger people, if I look at my students, and the students are 19 or 20, 21, hardly anybody watches TV anymore, because they all watch Netflix or they go to the YouTube, but they don't regularly see linear television, so they're not looking into kind of magazine and saying what's on TV tonight, because they're looking Netflix and YouTube. So it's different kind of media usage, and this, of course, makes it difficult for traditional companies to target or to communicate via traditional TV commercials to young audiences, right? And therefore, a lot of companies in parallel are also putting money into social media. But you don't need big spendings on social media. That's a good thing. That's good news for all small and medium-sized enterprises, because it can be done at very, very low cost. We listened to Professor Cerf when he was talking about the cost for social media for a campaign during Super Bowl, right? $3 million for 30 seconds. So not everybody can afford big spendings, right, on this, what you call ATL, above the line communication. So it's good news that it takes very little investment to set up a website, to set up a Facebook page or a Twitter account, and to get in contact with people, or to do also marketing research to collect the data that Luis helps you to analyze via social media. We think that all these forums, all this internet is a great source of information as well about your competitors. But companies are not so much aware of that. So they also need to look not only what is written about their products, but also what is written about competitors' products, because then they figure out what precisely is a problem of a customer.
Professor Kotler, in the last 20 years, when the technology has started coming into marketing, I've noticed that inequality has gone really high. There are really rich people or really poor people. Now, you are also the inventor of social marketing. Do you feel in future that social marketing will try to decrease the gap between inequality, or maybe the rich people start spending on the poorer ones? How we decrease that gap in future with the social marketing?
It's a very good question. Here are the facts about what's happening to income and wealth. Given the idea that capitalism is working, we want it to work well, but it's really working for the rich. Namely, those people who have a lot of money will make more money. And those who just have wages as the only source of income are very angry now. Here's why. Here's a country where the GDP is going up, let's say. Wages are flat. So who's getting the GDP that's going up? It's the 1%. Now, we're not asking for a revolution. We're asking this question that Peter Drucker asked so many years ago. What should the CEO be paid in relation to the average worker? Yeah. Let me surprise you with the number that Peter suggested. 20 times. A CEO is a good guy in saying that he doesn't want more than 20 times what the average worker gets. We're now beginning in the United States to require each company of any size to show the number, which is the ratio of his pay to the average worker. That number is 320.
Yeah, 320. Yeah.
320. I'm happy people are getting rich, but is that a good thing for a business and a society? You know, it's almost committing suicide, because if we leave very little money for the mass market, then who's going to buy our goods? Well, we can have mansions. We have people who are going to buy private airplanes and build their own yachts. If that's how you want your resources to be used, that's not the right way to use resources. If people are living in very poor housing, and one mansion could have built a lot of better places for people to live, we've got to start asking those leaders of ours to share more of the benefits of capitalism and of the growth. The other thing that's happening is GDP is not a sufficient indicator of how well Turkey is doing, or a city within Turkey, because GDP is everything you sold. If you sold more cigarettes, the GDP goes up. Maybe the cancer goes up too, but you didn't ask about that. So there's two other indices that people like to consider. One is the index of happiness in the country, where we learn that the happiest country is Denmark. Yeah. And it's not because they earn that much more, it's just there's something about satisfaction, being satisfied. The other index is an index of well-being. And that means that more people are getting educated, more people are getting healthy. So I like the well-being because it's a little more stable than just happiness. But the main thing is, what is a society for, if not to produce health and wealth and education? So my shift in thinking about capitalism, I've shifted to liking the Scandinavian model. The Scandinavian model is called sometimes the Nordic model. They say a good society is one that gives good education and good health to its people and other things, and even if the taxes have to be higher, So no one has to be suddenly with a medical problem that kills all of their assets, and so on and so forth. So I think the thing that's going to save capitalism is really Scandinavian capitalism, I think. And every society has to wrestle with this problem of what the future is of capitalism.
Sure. Professor Dominic, an interesting thing I read that carry forward the answer from Professor Kotler on that inequality. Amazon, Jeff Bezos, making $260 million every day. He said, I will give $300 million to a charity. But half of his employees are living on food stamps. So how do you foresee that?
Half
Of the employees
of Amazon, half of the employees are living on
food stamps. So how you see that, where the missing piece is in that Amazon, great brand, so much all around happening, but the salaries are not really very, even they can't live day to day?
Yeah, that is indeed, that is a serious issue. And it is not going to get better in the sense that the labor pool keeps on expanding, and at the same time, technology, much more so than, let's say, cheap imports from China or some other low-wage country. It's much more technology is eliminating some traditional jobs. And that is, I think, that's the trend line that we're on, and that I think is really problematic. I don't really have a solution to this. I know that some countries are starting to think about possible solutions, such as giving everybody a basic living wage, okay? That's being experimented with in some places. But as long as we have population expanding, this will be a very serious issue. I remember I was attending a presentation on this very topic, and there was a Japanese executive in the audience who said just the opposite. He said, we can't wait for this to come faster because the Japanese population is declining. And so, so if they want to grow their economy, they actually need to get much more productivity out of the workers. They certainly need to employ everybody, give them high wages so that there is high purchasing power. So they actually don't face that problem. But a lot of other countries do. And in the case of Bezos, I did not know actually that this is a company that underpays a large percent of their workforce. It surprises me a bit because they're in the high-tech sector, which tends to pay better than, let's say, the restaurant sector or some other sectors. But it is something that, at least now in the US, you're starting to see changes. For example, in my city, in Los Angeles, the minimum wage has been drastically increased and will continue to increase over the next few years. So there are corrective measures being put in place, because in and of itself, as Professor Kotler was saying, we can't continue with a 300-to-1 ratio between CEO income and average worker income. That is just completely off balance.
Sure, thank you. Professor Kotler, you had a very there used to be one of your good idea that marketing through cannibalization. Now, when you make a product, you get a team and start cannibalizing that product but I have noticed that the big companies, they started using in a negative way. Like Apple phone, when they launch a new model, they start cannibalizing your existing model by sending you the software which damages your phone.
Oh.
Yeah, so how you, and there was a big suit going on in US on this, that why they damage your phone. So how you see marketing through cannibalization will work in the future, 21st century, or they have to avoid it?
Well, let's be clear what cannibalization might be. I think that all companies are exposed to disruption, are very much, they should be aware that they may be replaced overnight by something else. And usually it will be replaced by some small firm that starts to sell the same thing, not as well as you'd sell it, not the most fashionable thing, but it cuts my cost of buying those things. And suddenly the market shifts toward the lower cost firm. So I think what's important is every company must do three things. They must do periodically what we call a vulnerability assessment. They must do an opportunity assessment, and they must do a scenario planning. What are they? Vulnerability is you go with your top people and you say, what could hurt us? What company can hurt us? Maybe it's not within your own competitive set. It's just a different kind of technology. And if you're going, this is a depressed meeting. I mean, everyone gets depressed because it's easy to imagine how you might be hurt. At least you're aware of this. Because if there's something that's going to disrupt you, what should you do? You should be doing the disruption. The whole point is to disrupt yourself before. Now, is that cannibalization? Now, whatever, disrupt yourself. Then the second meeting has to be about opportunities. Do we have any? I mean, there are companies that tell me they don't know where to go. As a matter of fact, when you look at all the money that the United States went back to the United States from Apple and the others who were keeping their money abroad, we thought that money would come back and build factories. No, that money came back and it was used in two ways. More dividends for the stockholders and more bonuses for top management. So basically, they didn't really know what to do with the money. My God, this is a terrible thing when capitalists don't need more money because they don't have opportunities in their mind. So I hope that every company is just breaking forth with so many ideas that the problem is really choosing the best rather than not having opportunities. The third thing is scenario planning. Ask yourself what you think the world will be like a year from now, or 3 years from now, or 5 years from now. What will gas prices be? Anything that is important for you to know. You'll probably end up with 2 or 3 scenarios. One is a pretty dim one. There will be an increase in joblessness because technology is killing some jobs. You could make up a lot of nightmarish views of a future for the next 3 or 4 years. What about a more optimistic scenario? What would make us optimistic about the next 3 or 4 years? Even with 2 scenarios, what will we do if, in fact, it's that depressing scenario? What should we now start doing now so we are not vulnerable to that situation? And then do the same scenario planning if it's optimistic. Because all of that is a way of thinking ahead. Because we have to be futurists to some extent. You can't just focus on what's selling now. What will sell of your product some years from now? Who's going to be the buyers? And by the way, if the buyers of the future are going to be the younger people, and if the younger people's media consumption is not advertisement, the 30-second commercial, but it is digital completely, and you're not going digital, you're not going to be attracting millennials, and they will be not buying your product. Sure. So if someone has said his firm doesn't have any digital, I'd say that's a weakness, that you are exposing yourself to a changing world where you will be irrelevant. You're going to be obsolete.
Professor Kotler, what would be your one advice to the Turkish small, medium enterprises, what you call hidden champions, for the next 10 years? Where would they should focus more?
You use the word hidden champions. It's a good word to bring up now. Let me just say there's a dear friend we all have, Herman Simon, who wrote a book called Hidden Champions. It was really a story about German companies that are not well known to the public, but they are so profitable. And the answer is they're nichers. Niching is profitable. So it would be the kind of company who serves a narrow need, which is global. It's a global need, and is known as the best for that need. For example, there is a need for the best binoculars in the world. It's needed by armies, so the generals can really have the best field glasses. And there's only one company to think of in that, and everyone will buy at the most expensive price those glasses. That's a nicher. Sure. That niche, by the way, the trouble is some of these German profitable niche companies are being bought by the Chinese. Yes. Wow. An acquisition spree by the Chinese to take over the niche. So your question is good because it's good for Turkey. Can I be maybe a nicher if I'm a B2B firm where I'm making some mineral or ingredient that I'm the best at that ingredient and I will be known as the best. In fact, there's two other competitors, but there's only one that's going to be rich. So niching to me has always been a very attractive strategy. For all we know, they're sitting right in here, some of the top nichers in the world. They're not well known. Yeah.
Mark, you were in Shell for a while as a VP marketing. Then you did your training, you did your PhD, and joined the teaching profession. So how you feel in the future, which way to go? You have experience from both sides. So what would be your advice to the Turkish companies? One good advice based on your experience from practical world and the academic world.
Practical advice. I would follow up on what Phil just said. I think because the times are so dynamic and everything is so volatile, you always have to think about how can you best disrupt yourself before you're being disrupted. And we are always taking the example of when we were sitting at a breakfast table. The biggest hotel corporation on the planet is Airbnb, and they don't own a single room, right? And the biggest logistics company on the planet is Uber, and they don't earn a single truck. That's disruption. And every company can be disrupted. It's of course, it's a bit like everybody knows that, but nobody's too big to fail and nobody's too small to succeed. Even Apple and Amazon, those kind of corporations may be disrupted in the future. We don't know. So my advice would be always have a look at the market, at the customer. I always try to be agile, to try to anticipate the future, like Phil was saying. Do the scenario planning. Where do you want to be? How is the world going to be in 1 year time? So don't remain where you are right now. There's a nice saying, and I would like to finish that, from Tim Menon. He was the executive vice president at Hewlett-Packard, and he said, the biggest single threat for any company on the planet is to stay with one previously successful business model or product 1 year too long. Mm-hmm. So, because then you become complacent, right? Then you lack agility, and you stop moving. I think this is, in today's world, in general, no matter in which branch you are, this is the key thing. You have to have an innovation culture.
I sometimes word it too at the end of a lecture, if you're in the same business tomorrow as you are in today, you will be out of business.
That's it.
Mr. Dominic, the one advice from you, from B2B, because for the future in Turkey, like there must be a lot of people here who are primarily in that business, from B2B. So what is your advice for those specific companies? You know?
Yeah. Well, I would first of all totally concur with what has been said. But I think I would focus on excellence in my chosen segments. Really try to be a leader, even if my market is small, but try to be a leader in it, not necessarily a market share leader, but a customer satisfaction leader. Because that then provides you with a brand image, which then, if you choose to grow in other directions, gives you a platform for doing so.
So we have a pretty reasonable, good discussion with our Professor Kotler, Professor Mark, and Professor Dominic. The future of marketing, well, marketing is there. Marketing was there, it is there, it will be there. See, we have to mix, like if we really want to succeed, what I can add here that we have to mix the passion and profession, you know. The passion, what we feel inside, whatever profession we are in, but then passion make our profession to the next level. You know, I was lately in Japan, and the Fujifilm, their global CMO was asking us, you know, that what is your suggestion, how we can really go to the next level. And I gave them a suggestion, just came the word to my mind at that moment. I said, never stop. And that word they picked so well that if you see the Financial Times of November 20th, they put a whole one-page ad there, never stop. And now they are planning to co-author a book together with Professor Kotler, and the name will be Never Stop. So they pick it so well. So we are so proud to be in Turkey and Istanbul. Shakib Bey has really made it happen. And we are also planning here to come up with come here every year with WMS, and then putting a book together with Shakib Bey and Professor Kotler and other contributors on how the Istanbul can be really a brand builder in the future. There are a couple of things which are happening, and I'm sure our other speakers will share with you. But thank you very much, Professor Kotler. Thank you, Professor Mark. Thank you, Professor Dominic, for your contribution, and we look forward to you.